Void Miner, Children of the Belt, Part 6, Chapter 26, Orphan Competence. Arg watched from the Widow's Bridge as the station's artificial lights reflected off patched metal corridors and into the faint shimmer of distant stars beyond the viewport. The derelict station had been a ghost for years, a skeleton of the Belt's past, and yet, under the care of his orphans, it was beginning to hum with life again. The air wasn't perfect, the wiring wasn't tidy, and the temperature fluctuated with minor yet noticeable spikes. But there was work being done, real work, and that made a difference. He straightened his posture, rolling his shoulders to ease the tension. His boots clicked across the deck plates as he moved toward the command console. Around him, the youngest orphans, Jarek, Arel, and a few others were running diagnostics, their movements precise, careful, and surprisingly coordinated. The older teens, Kerr, Teo, and several others, managed life support checks, patch inspections, and inventory rotations. The hum of life inside the station was tangible. Arg felt a pang of pride quickly followed by sharp edge of worry. They were competent, yes, but competence wasn't independence. They had skills, yes, but experience hadn't taught them judgment yet, and judgment mattered more than anything, especially in the Belt, where one miscalculation could send a vessel, or a life, into the void. Arg? Jarek's voice came from the far end of the room. The boy waved a tablet toward him, displaying the readings from the East Wing's air filtration system. The filters are holding steady, but the secondary units are showing minor fluctuations. Should we reroute power? Arg stepped closer, examining the data. The readings were within safe limits, but only barely. A moment of hesitation passed before he nodded. Do it, but watch the secondary circuits. I don't want any surprises if the main units spike again. Jarek's expression shifted from tentative to determined as he moved to execute the reroute. The younger ones were learning, and Arg could see it in the precision of their hands, the confidence in the way they spoke to one another without constantly looking back at him. It was subtle, but it was progress. He moved on, checking the inventory logs for life support consumables. The orphans had tracked them efficiently, noting trends in oxygen depletion, water recycling, and the minor anomalies caused by the station's aging system. Arg made a note to commend them later, though he knew he had to temper praise with the reality of the Belt. Survival didn't reward sentimentality. Hours passed as Arg moved between tasks and observation points. He watched as Teo and Kerr conducted a whole integrity sweep, their patched suits creaking softly as they navigated narrow maintenance tunnels. Their radios crackled with each other's updates, voices clipped and professional. He noted the way Kerr paused at junctions to check schematics and adjust his route, a small, almost imperceptible sign that he had begun thinking ahead, rather than simply reacting. Arg's chest tightened. He knew the moment was coming when he would have to step back entirely. The orphans had grown, but they were not ready for what was coming. He would have to leave them, and the knowledge weighed heavier than any physical burden he had ever carried. He called them all to the central hub. Gather, he ordered. The orphans fell into a loose semicircle around him, eyes bright but tired, their faces smudged with grime, sweat, and the persistent marks of hard labor. You've done well, he began, letting the words hang. Better than I expected. Better than anyone could have expected. But today, things change. A murmur ran through the group. Jarek tilted his head. Change how? Arg let the silence stretch a moment longer. The words would come slowly. They always did. From here on, you'll handle more on your own. I won't be able to stand over your shoulder for every repair, every scav run, every check of life support. Ariel's brow furrowed. But we need you. Yes, Arg admitted, you do. And I want to be there. But He let the words drop, unfinished, letting the weight of the sentence settle. He could feel them leaning on him, as always, and he knew they wouldn't fully understand. Not yet. "But we'll manage, right?" Kerr asked, though his voice carried more hope than certainty. Arg allowed a tight smile. "You'll manage. You've already proven it. But today, I'll test it. Not for punishment, not to see who's best. I'm testing your ability to survive without me guiding every step. Mistakes will happen. That's unavoidable. But how you handle them, that is what will matter." The orphans exchanged glances, nervous yet eager. Arg saw the mix of fear and pride in their eyes. He had created a crucible, and now he would see if it held. The first exercise was straightforward, if exhausting. A full system check of all life support units across the station. Arg split the team into pairs. Kerr and Teo took the eastern wing. Ariel and Jurek took the central hub, and the youngest orphans were assigned to secondary monitoring stations, recording data, and running minor repairs. Arg observed from the command deck, monitoring comms and system readouts. The orphans moved quickly, but not recklessly. Kerr paused at one junction, consulting the schematics projected on his tablet, double-checking connections before rerouting power. Teo caught a minor leak in a coolant pipe, patching it with the calm precision of someone who had learned to think under pressure. Arg's chest tightened. They were growing. And yet, he could not shake the knowledge that growth did not equal readiness. There were lessons no drills could teach, experiences that could only be survived, and he would not be there when they faced those experiences. He checked the youngest one's readings. They had recorded anomalies accurately, noting deviations in pressure, humidity, and minor oxygen fluctuations. Jurek's hands were steady, and Ariel called out updates clearly and efficiently. Arg allowed himself a brief moment of pride. By midday, the orphans were exhausted, but they were also more organized. Arg gathered them again in the central hub. "Well done," he said. "You handled life support checks. Some mistakes, yes, but nothing catastrophic. That's progress." He paused, scanning their faces. "Now for the next step." The orphans leaned forward instinctively. They knew he meant a simulated scavenging run, but today it would be different. Today, he would not guide them directly. He would observe and advise from a distance, only interfering if necessary. "This exercise is critical," Arg explained. "You will conduct a full scavenging run in the eastern sector. You will plan the route, assess hazards, prioritize resources. I will monitor from the command deck, but I will not direct your every move. You make decisions. You survive or fail by those decisions." Excitement rippled through the group. Fear mingled with it, a tangible tension that Arg could almost touch. He added, "If you fail, I will intervene only to prevent death, not to teach. This is your first step toward independence. Remember, mistakes can cost more than pride." The orphans nodded. Each face carried determination and anxiety. Arg could see the first sparks of leadership emerging in Kerr and Teo, the careful calculation in Jurek's eyes, and the cautious bravery in Ariel. The scavenging run began. Arg watched as they navigated the dim corridors, checking vents, scanning for structural weaknesses, and hauling salvage from old storage bays. He listened to their calm chatter, noting how they communicated, directly, efficiently, and without constant deference. A minor complication arose when a conduit gave way, spilling a wash of coolant across the floor. Kerr and Teo reacted immediately, stabilizing the pipe, rerouting the flow, and securing the area. Ariel shouted a warning to Jurek, who adjusted the scanner to account for the interference. Arg remained silent, only monitoring. No intervention, no guidance. They could feel the weight of responsibility now, and he let it settle. Minutes stretched into an hour. Sweat streaked their faces, Muscles burned, and lungs heaved in that recycled air. And yet, they continued. The orphans were learning that confidence demanded endurance, and that independence required decision-making under pressure. By the time they returned to the central hub, Arg could see the subtle changes. Jarek walked taller, no longer looking to Arg for every step. Ariel's hands were steadier. Kerr and Teo moved with more confidence, issuing instructions without hesitation. Arg allowed himself a quiet nod. They were ready, or as ready as they could be without him. Evening settled across the station. Arg sat alone in the command deck, reviewing logs and monitoring the subtle resonance that had begun to ripple through the hull. The seed fragments were far away at the hub, but their pulse was a steady reminder that time was slipping. He thought of Kara, heavy with child, managing the guild while the fragments stirred beneath her hands. He thought of the orphans, competent yet untested, standing at the edge of what would come. The realization settled in fully. He would have to leave them behind, and when he did, he could not guarantee they would survive what lay ahead. But he would leave them stronger than they had ever been, and that was all he could do. Arg exhaled, letting the weight rest on him. The stars outside the viewport were steady, indifferent to human struggle. He would face what came, but the orphans, they would have to stand on their own. And for the first time, he allowed himself to hope that they might. Chapter 27. Partial Resolution. Lights flickering faintly over patched bulkheads. Arg moved down the central corridor, hands clasped behind his back, listening to the steady whir of life support fans and the occasional metallic echo of the orphans' boots on the metal floor. After yesterday's scavenging and life support drills, the station felt different, more alive, more confident, more capable. Yet there was a tension beneath the surface, small fractures in the orphans' cohesion that had gone unnoticed during the day. He stepped outside the comm hub, leaning against the frame. Kerr and Teo were arguing over the best route for the next resource sweep. Their voices were low, measured, but Arg could hear the edge. It was subtle, the kind of tension that could unravel quickly if left unattended. "You're taking unnecessary risks," Kerr was saying. "The East Corridor has structural damage we can't predict. I'm not sending the team in without proper support." Teo rolled his shoulders, leaning closer to the console. "And I'm telling you that we'll never finish gathering enough ore if we wait for perfection. Sometimes risks have to be calculated, not avoided." Arg pushed off the wall, stepping into the hub. Both boys snapped attention toward him, eyes wary. "Kerr, Teo," he said calmly. "We need a resolution. Talk like this in front of the others, and confusion spreads. You'll have your say, but we resolve this now." Kerr swallowed, jaw tight. Teo's gaze didn't waver. Arg let the silence stretch, giving them room to consider that neither fear nor defiance would shift his decision. Finally, Kerr spoke, quieter. "We can combine routes. Start with the safer sections and move gradually towards the unstable areas. That way we gather more ore without putting anyone in immediate risk." Teo nodded slowly. "Fine. We'll adjust scanners and supply allocations. Keep the secondary teams on alert." Arg gave a small approving nod. "Good. That's compromise. That's leadership. Remember, the station depends on more than strength or stubbornness. It depends upon cooperation. Never forget that." The two boys exchanged a glance, a mixture of respect and relief passing between them. Arg let them return to work, satisfied for the moment. They were still learning, but this was progress. Partial, yes, but progress nonetheless. Elsewhere, Jarek and Ariel were managing inventory, consolidating supplies from their latest scavenging run. Their hands moved efficiently, counting units of water, oxygen canisters, repair tools, and spare circuitry. The youngest orphans watched, mimicking movements and calling out minor discrepancies. Ariel caught a mismatched set of filters. These are from the wrong batch, she called. Could cause pressure issues in the main wing. Jorik adjusted the readings. Noted. We'll set them aside and use them only if the others fail. Arg observed silently from the doorway, noting the way their teamwork had evolved. There were still gaps, hesitations, mistakes, misunderstandings. But the orphans were learning to trust each other, to rely on more than just him for guidance. He allowed himself a brief moment to relax. These small victories were essential. They didn't erase the coming danger, but they laid a foundation strong enough to endure it. Hours passed, and Arg conducted routes through the station. He checked on hull integrity, inventory logs, and the youngest orphans' workstations. Each stop revealed competence, but also lingering issues. One minor pressure leak went unnoticed until it triggered a small alarm. Arg corrected it quietly, but made a note to address it during tomorrow's training. He found the patterns familiar, even as the orphans grew stronger. Cracks appeared under stress. Confidence bred mistakes when combined with inexperience. His role now was to temper them, not smother them. They had to feel the weight of responsibility without being crushed by it. By mid-afternoon, he gathered the group again. Today's partial resolution is simple, he said, letting the words settle over them. You've handled tasks with competence, you've resolved disagreements, and improved coordination. But no system is perfect, and no team is without flaws. We address them, we learn from them. That is the lesson today. Teo raised an eyebrow. So what's next? Arg smiled faintly. Observation, reflection. Identify weak points and correct them. That is your duty as a team, not as individuals. The orphans nodded, some eagerly, others reluctantly. They were beginning to understand that competence alone wasn't enough. They needed discernment, patience, and an awareness of each other's strengths and weakness. Later, Arg moved to the widow's observation deck. He watched the faint shimmer of the belt stars, distant and unyielding. The fragments at the hub pulsed faintly through the comm signal, a subtle vibration that made his chest tighten. Kara's last message still echoed in his mind. The seed was awakening. He exhaled slowly. He could prepare the orphans, train them, strengthen them, but he could not protect them from what was coming. The truth sat heavily in his chest. He would have to leave them behind. They were competent, partially resolved in their conflicts, but not ready for the trial itself. He turned back toward the station interior, listening to the soft clatter of orphans working. Each step, each movement, reminded him why he had chosen this path: survival and growth. They would endure, they would manage, even without him. That evening, tensions flared again, this time between the youngest members of the crew. Ariel caught two children squabbling over a rationed food supply. Enough, she barked, frustration lining her voice. Arg stepped in, placing a hand on her shoulder. Step back, he said firmly, giving her room to manage the situation herself. Let them work it out. You guide, but don't take over. The children's voices rose and fell. Negotiations mingled with threats and bargaining. After several tense minutes, they reached an agreement. One shared water, the other accepted the remaining rations. Ariel breathed a sigh of relief, turning to Arg. They did it, she said softly, without me. Arg smiled faintly. They're learning. That's the point. The moment was small, almost trivial, but it carried weight. Growth came in incremental steps, in partial resolutions, in tiny victories that were often overlooked. He made a mental note to remember this. Every step counted. Night descended across the station. Arg walked the corridors again, pausing to glance into the small workspaces where the orphans slept. Their faces were peaceful, some even smiling in dreams. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring new challenges. Equipment malfunctions, scavenging missions, simulated emergencies, each designed to push them closer to independence. He allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The station had grown from a ghost shell into something almost alive. The orphans had grown from frightened, reckless children into a competent, if still imperfect, crew. He could feel the subtle changes, the way they communicated, the way they anticipated problems, the way they learned to correct each other without chaos. But he also knew the truth that pressed against his chest with every heartbeat. The seed was awakening. The fragments were stirring, and he would not be able to shield them from what was coming. He would have to leave them behind. Morning arrived with the sharp hum of the station's power systems. Arg gathered the orphans once more, this time for a more informal review.
Yesterday, you resolved disputes, handled systems, and navigated emergencies, he said, scanning their faces. Today, we focus on reflection. Each of you will identify one strength and one weakness in your work. Share it with the group. Be honest. Be open. Be ready to learn.
The group hesitated only briefly. Kerr spoke first, his tone careful. I think my strength is planning, but my weakness is sometimes I ignore minor details. Teo nodded. Mine is execution. I can act quickly, but sometimes fail to account for long-term consequences. Ariel followed, Jarek and the youngest children each taking turns. The exercise was awkward at first, then natural, then revealing. They began to see not just their own capabilities, but those of their teammates. Arg watched silently, noting patterns, identifying areas that would need further guidance, and feeling the smallest thread of hope. These partial resolutions were critical. Each one strengthened the team while revealing gaps. Arg knew the moment was approaching when the team would be tested fully without him, and this was their preparation. By midday, the orphans were conducting another system sweep. Arg moved quietly among them, observing, noting their efficiency and decision-making. He intervened only twice, minor course corrections that kept a simulation of risk from becoming disaster. They were learning to navigate complexity, to act in concert, to anticipate consequences. The exercise ended successfully. No critical failures, no major injuries, only lessons learned, embedded in the routines they now follow instinctively. Arg allowed a quiet smile. For the first time, he truly felt that he could step back, at least briefly, and watch them manage without immediate supervision. They were competent. Partially resolved, yes, but competent. And that was all he could hope for. The night fell again. Arg sat in the widow's bridge, staring out at the endless dark, listening to the hum of the station and the steady breathing of the orphans asleep below. He thought of Kara, and of the fragments pulsing at the hub, and of the child moving within her. The weight of impending trials pressed on him. But for now, the orphans were ready to hold the station. They would continue to grow. They would continue to learn. And when the time came, they would survive, even if he was not there to guide them. Arg exhaled slowly, the faintest flicker of hope threading through the tension in his chest. The partial resolution had been achieved. The foundation was solid. But the seed's pulse whispered in the back of his mind, a constant reminder that no resolution was permanent, no safety guaranteed. The real test was still ahead. He clenched his hands in the railing and whispered into the quiet of space.
You'll hold this place. I know you will. But be ready for what comes next.
And somewhere, far away, Kara pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the same pulse, sensing the same urgency, and bracing herself for the storm that neither of them could yet see. The orphans slept, the station hummed, and the fragments stirred, an uneasy, fragile balance. Chapter 28. Final lessons. The station had grown quiet, almost deceptively so. The hum of life support and the soft creaks of the bulkheads were the only sound in the corridors, punctuated by the occasional shuffle of boots as the orphans moved from one station to the next. Arg walked slowly through the dimly lit halls, hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning every detail. This was the final phase of their preparation. The orphans had learned competence and partial teamwork, but independence demanded more: crisis management, redundancy, and the capacity to think under pressure. Today, Arg would push them to the edge of their abilities, not recklessly, not to harm, but to ensure that when he was forced to leave them behind, they could survive. He paused outside the main control room, watching Kerr and Teo organize tools for the upcoming drill. The two had grown into natural leaders, their interactions smoother than ever, although not without occasional friction. Behind them, Ariel and Jarek checked supplies, cross-referencing logs against system reports. The youngest children flittered between stations, delivering updates, double-checking minor repairs. Arg inhaled sharply, letting the weight of the day settle over him. He knew the drill would push them, mentally and physically, to limits he could not fully anticipate. Mistakes would happen, conflicts would arise, but every failure would be a lesson, and every lesson would prepare them for what was coming. "Gather," he called, his voice echoing through the corridors. The orphans formed a loose semicircle around him, faces tense, ready. They understood the stakes. They had seen the fragments' pulse grow stronger, even from this distance, and they knew Arg's concern was no longer abstract. "Today," he began, "we run a full-scale crisis drill. Every system, every module, every potential hazard. You will face failures, equipment malfunctions, and unexpected problems. Some of you will lead, some will follow. All of you will act without me directing every step." A murmur rippled through the group, nerves and excitement mingling. Arg let it sit for a moment, watching them, noting how they braced themselves. "This is not punishment," he continued. "This is practice for survival. You will fail at some things. You will succeed at others. The point is not perfection. It is preparation." The drill began in the eastern wing, where life support systems were older and more fragile. Arg simulated a power surge in the oxygen recycle module, forcing the team to reroute energy through secondary circuits. Kerr took command naturally, issuing instructions calmly, though he faltered slightly when a secondary conduit blew up unexpectedly. Teo reacted instantly, sealing the breach and restoring flow. The precision of his actions earned a nod from Arg. Elsewhere, Jarek and Ariel managed supply allocation under the pressure of fluctuating readings. The younger orphans were assigned minor repairs and monitoring, though their mistakes became immediately visible, providing opportunities for learning. Arg observed silently, noting every decision, every hesitation, every successful improvisation. Hours stretched into the exercise, each moment testing their endurance, their judgment, and their ability to collaborate under stress. Arg did not intervene unless necessary to prevent permanent injury or damage. He allowed them to experience consequences, knowing that resilience was forged in the heat of real challenge, not the comfort of instruction. By midday, the drill had escalated. He introduced cascading failures: a compromised hull panel, minor flooding in a maintenance bay, a simulated fire in a storage compartment. Each scenario required the orphans to assess risk, allocate resources, and make decisions quickly. Kerr delegated tasks efficiently. Teo reinforced weak sections. Ariel and Jarek managed data and communications. The youngest children ran critical checks and passed updates accurately. Mistakes were made. A minor pressure fluctuation went unnoticed. A small fire suppression delay occurred, but they adapted, corrected, and continued. Arg allowed himself a quiet observation. They were learning to anticipate, not merely react. This was the skill he had hoped most to instill, the ability to adapt under pressure, to think beyond the immediate, to recognize and correct failures before they became disasters. That was the difference between survival and death in the belt. During a brief pause, Arg gathered the group for feedback.
You handled the first series of failures well,
he said, scanning their sweat-streaked faces.
Mistakes were made, yes, but corrected. The point is not to avoid errors. It is to learn from them, to adapt faster, to trust your judgment and each other.
He allowed them a few minutes of rest, watching as the orphans sprawled across bunks, leaned against consoles, or wiped down tools. Even in exhaustion, there was focus, a simmering determination that had not existed when they first arrived.
You are stronger than you think,
he continued, voice low but firm.
But strength alone is not enough. Judgment and teamwork matter more than raw power. Mistakes are inevitable. What matters is how you respond. Remember that.
The orphans nodded, silent, but absorbing the lesson. The second phase of the drill focused on redundancy. Arg intentionally disabled non-critical systems, forcing the team to improvise workarounds. Communication arrays flickered, sensors failed, and emergency lighting became their primary guide. Kerr took charge of coordinating backup power. Teo reinforced hull monitoring protocols. Ariel recalibrated environmental controls, and Jarek handled supply distribution. Even the youngest orphans participated actively, checking systems, reporting anomalies, and supporting their peers. Arg watched them move as a unit. Coordination had improved dramatically. Though subtle cracks remained, moments of hesitation, occasional miscommunication, overcorrection in response to perceived threats. These were expected. No team, especially one so young, could achieve perfection overnight. Yet they were far more capable than he had anticipated. Competence had become a habit. Partial resolution had strengthened their bond, and redundancy protocols were beginning to embed themselves into instinct. The final stage of the drill was a simulated hull breach in the western wing. Arg triggered alarms, sealing compartments artificially while cutting power to secondary systems. Panic rose immediately, but the orphans responded with practiced efficiency. Kerr and Teo coordinated evacuation routes, assigning younger members to critical tasks, ensuring no one was left vulnerable. Ariel led the youngest children through emergency drills, guiding them calmly yet firmly. Jarek monitored environmental data, adjusting for the simulated failures and ensuring that life support remained operational. Arg intervened only once, sealing a critical panel that had been left exposed. Otherwise, he remained a silent observer, documenting every decision, every success, and every failure. By the time the drill concluded, the orphans were exhausted, but functional. They had faced failure, adapted, and survived. That, Arg knew, was the essence of true competence. Evening settled over the station. Arg gathered the orphans for debriefing.
You did well, he began. Each of you handled responsibilities, adapted to failures, and learned to trust one another. Mistakes were made, but corrected. That is the point. The station is safer because of your actions today, and so are you.
He paused, scanning their faces.
But remember, this is only a drill. The real challenges will be harder, more complex, and unavoidable. You cannot rely on me to guide every step when the time comes. You will have to trust yourselves and each other to survive.
The weight of his words settled over them, and he could see comprehension dawning in their eyes. They understood that the comfort of his presence would not always be there. That realization, he knew, was critical. Later, Arg moved through the quiet station alone. He inspected minor repairs, checked environmental controls, and reviewed data logs. Everything was in order, but the thought of leaving the orphans behind pressed at his chest. They were competent now, more than he had expected, but he knew they would face challenges and dangers he could not foresee. The fragment's pulse had grown stronger again. Through the comm line, Kara's presence was faint but steady. He imagined her in her quarters, hand on her belly, the child within moving gently, feeling the vibrations he could sense even from afar. The thought tightened his chest. He could prepare the orphans, strengthen their skills, teach them redundancy and crisis management, but he could not keep them from the storm. He could not protect them from the seed itself. And yet, he allowed himself a brief, fragile hope. They had learned to think, to adapt, to trust. They could survive, perhaps not perfectly, not without hardship, but they could endure. Night deepened. Arg stood at the widow's bridge, looking out into the dark expanse of the belt. The orphans slept or rested below, bodies exhausted but minds sharpened. The station hummed around him, alive with their efforts, their growing competence. He thought of Kara again, and the fragments pulsing at the hub, and the child moving inside her. The world beyond the station was vast and uncertain, filled with challenges that no amount of training could fully prepare them for. But for now, the partial resolution and lessons were enough. The orphans were strong. They were competent. They were ready for the next steps, whatever they might be. Arg exhaled, letting the weight of responsibility settle for a moment. Tomorrow he would continue training. Tomorrow he would push them further. But tonight he allowed himself to witness their progress, to acknowledge the growth that had taken place, and to recognize that his efforts had not been in vain. He whispered to the quiet of the station, to the stars beyond, and perhaps to the seed fragments themselves. You will survive this. You will endure. And when the time comes, you will stand on your own. The orphans slept. The station hummed. And the fragments pulsed, a constant, subtle reminder that the real challenges were yet to come. Chapter 29. Preparing for the Unknown. The station thrummed with quiet energy, a low hum of life support and machinery filling every corridor. The orphans moved through the drills with precision, each step rehearsed, each action calculated. Arg observed from the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes scanning every readout, every monitor. The drill had been meticulously planned. Simulated hull breaches, cascading power failures, emergency evacuations, all designed to push the children to the edge of their training without tipping them into real danger. From the beginning, Arg insisted that this would be their final drill under his supervision. Every lesson learned, every skill taught, and every error corrected had led to this moment. Today he would see if they were truly capable of holding the station without his constant guidance. And yet, even as he monitored their progress, an uneasy sensation gnawed at the back of his mind. It was subtle at first, a vibration through the comm signal, a slight resonance in the station's systems that didn't belong, a pulse too regular, too insistent, barely perceptible. Arg felt it first in his chest, then along the back of his neck, a prickling awareness that something beyond the ordinary was stirring. Kara had mentioned the fragment's subtle movements in passing, but this was different, stronger, growing. He shook it off initially, attributing it to exhaustion, to the weight of the overseeing of the orphan's final drill. But then came the system's irregularities, a brief flicker of the environmental monitor, a sensor reading that jumped inexplicably, a shift in the station's hum that made him pause. Kara's voice came over the secure comm, calm but edged with tension. Arg, do you feel that?
Yeah,
he replied, his jaw tight.
It's the seed fragments. They're pulsing stronger. Something's changing.
There was a pause. We need to keep the children focused, Kara said quietly. Don't alarm them.
Arg exhaled slowly. I won't, but I need to monitor closely.
Down in the eastern wing, the orphans were deep into the drill. Kerr coordinated the rerouting of secondary power. Teo reinforced small monitoring. Ariel managed environmental controls, and Jarek checked supply distribution. Even the youngest children carried out assigned tasks with growing competence, double-checking readings and reporting anomalies. Arg could see the evolution in their movements. Where hesitation had once marked every decision, now there was confidence. Where uncertainty had slowed responses, there was decisiveness. They were performing as a unit. They were learning to anticipate, to react, to cover each other's gaps. And yet, as their competence grew, Arg's unease deepened. The seed fragment's pulse was becoming more than a subtle vibration. It was a presence, felt only by him and Kara, a pressure at the edge of perception that made systems hum differently, made his focus tighten involuntarily, made him aware of things he couldn't yet name. He clenched his hands behind his back and forced himself to focus. The children must not sense this. They had enough to contend with. They didn't need fear layered on top of drills and simulated emergencies. The drill intensified. Arg introduced a simulated hull breach in the western wing while cutting power to secondary circuits. Alarms screamed briefly, emergency lighting flared, and the orphans responded instinctively. Kerr took command, directing the younger children to secure key points while Teo managed compromised systems. Everything proceeded according to plan until the pulse came again. This time it was sharper, insistent. Subtle indicators, minor anomalies in system readouts, unaccountable sensor readings, signaled it. Arg felt it in his chest, a rising tension he could not ignore. He stepped forward, voice firm but measured.
Stop the drill.
Head snapped up. What? Kerr asked, brow furrowed, mid-command.
Immediately,
he said. His tone brooked no arguments. The children froze, mid-movement, unsure whether this was part of the drill or a real order. Arg moved quickly, overriding automated systems to stabilize the sections under stimulated stress. He directed them to safe zones, calming voices layered over alarms and flashing lights.
This isn't part of the exercise, he explained once they gathered. Something is affecting the station. We will resume only when I say it's safe.
The children's faces were tense. Confusion mingled with the ingrained discipline of following orders. They accepted his authority without question, but curiosity and unease lingered in their eyes. Kerr spoke quietly, measuring his words. Are we in danger? Arg shook his head, forcing a calm he didn't feel.
Not from the station itself, but there is something external, beyond us. I need to deal with it. I will return, but I don't know how long it'll take.
Ariel's eyes widened. You're leaving us?
I have to, Arg said softly. The pulse we're feeling. Kara and I sense it directly. The fragments are active in ways we cannot ignore. You are competent. You are prepared. You will manage here while I am gone. I will have support arranged if needed. But you must trust yourselves as well.
Jarek nodded, swallowing hard. We'll hold the station. We'll follow instructions.
I know you will,
Arg said, the weight of his gaze heavy but reassuring.
I wouldn't leave you otherwise.
Later, in the Widow's Bridge, Arg took a deep breath and reviewed system logs. The anomalies tied to the fragment's pulses were subtle but unmistakable. Vibrations in the comm arrays, shifts in energy flows, minor fluctuations in environmental sensors. To anyone else, they would appear as routine glitches. To him, they were a warning. Kara's voice came over the secured channel again. Arg, it's stronger than I expected. The fragments are coordinating. He exhaled slowly.
I can feel it. We need to prepare. Mentally and physically. The trial is approaching and we cannot delay.
Do the children know yet? Kara asked.
Not fully, he replied. I've warned them that I will leave and that I can't say how long it'll take. But they are competent. They'll manage while we handle this, you and I.
He let the words trail off, tension threading them, unspoken fears that neither could yet voice aloud. Evening fell over the station. The orphans carried out minor maintenance and system checks, their movements efficient and purposeful. Yet beneath the surface, they were unaware of the magnitude of what was coming. Arg observed from the bridge, watching Kerr and Teo coordinate. Ariel and Jarek double-checking supplies, and the youngest orphans verify monitor systems. They were ready, but only partially. Competence was established. Teamwork was improving, but experience under true danger was incomplete. Arg's heart tightened, knowing this. He moved among them quietly, touching consoles, inspecting repair work, correcting minor oversights. They noticed, but there was no anxiety, only the presence of guidance, the familiar weight of his watchful oversight. By nightfall, Arg gathered them for a final briefing.
You managed today's exercises well, he said, voice steady. You have shown growth, competence, and teamwork. But understand this. The world outside this station is not a drill. It will test you in ways we cannot simulate. You will face challenges without my guidance. That is the reality. Prepare for it mentally, and trust each other.
Ariel, cautious yet assertive, spoke first. We understand. We'll do what we can, Kerr added. We're ready. We'll hold the station. Arg allowed a rare, brief smile.
Good. That's all I can ask. Remember, you are competent, not complete, but capable.
He glanced at the monitors again. The fragment's pulse was faintly visible, an undercurrent in the station's energy, a reminder that this was only the beginning. He exhaled, placing a hand on the rail of the bridge.
I will return,
he whispered, more to himself than anyone else.
I must, but you will manage here until then.
The orphans nodded, absorbing the gravity of the situation in silence. Their trust in him had grown steadily over the months, and now it was tested in a different way. They were competent, structured, and resilient, but they were still children facing challenges beyond their years. And beyond the station, in the dark vastness of the belt, the seed fragments pulsed quietly, insistently, a warning that the trial was coming, and nothing could delay it. Arg's chest tightened. He would have to leave them, but not yet. Not until he had prepared himself and Kara for the storm that was approaching. And as he watched the monitors and the children below, he knew one thing. When he returned, the balance of the station, the orphans, and the belt itself would never be the same again.
Chapter 30. Trial Preparation.
The Dust Widow left the derelict station behind, engines humming with a steady, deliberate rhythm. Arg leaned against the console, eyes on the fading silhouette of the station. The children were competent. They had performed brilliantly in the final drill, and every system he had left behind was stable, but the thought of leaving them still pressed heavily on them. He could feel the pulse of the seed fragments deep in his chest, subtle at first, like a quiet vibration at the edge of awareness. The sensation grew, almost imperceptibly, until it settled into a persistent rhythm, pressing against his thoughts. Only he and Kara could feel it. The children, busy managing the drill, would not. Arg keyed the secure comm to the hub commander. The link clicked, and the familiar face appeared on the viewport.
Commander,
Arg began, voice controlled but firm.
The orphans are set. They handled the final drill well. They're competent, but I need you to maintain oversight in my absence. Only intervene if absolutely necessary.
The commander's eyes were steady, aware of the children from Arg's prior discussions. Understood. I've reviewed your contingency protocols. They're capable, but I'll leave monitors active. You leave only when you're confident.
I am,
Arg said, his gaze flickering to the navigation readouts.
There's more. Seed fragments are pulsing stronger. Main seed is approaching full awareness. Kara and I need to prepare immediately.
The commander's expression sharpened. Do you need assistance with containment?
No, Arg replied. We can manage it. But if anything goes wrong, follow the protocols. The children know what to do.
A short pause. Understood. Safe travels, Arg, and be cautious.
I will,
Arg said, cutting the link. The Dust Widow surged forward, bridging the void between the derelict and the hub. Arg exhaled, pressing his palms to the console as the fragment's pulses thrummed faintly in his chest. The seed's presence was growing, insistent, demanding attention and focus. He could feel the weight of what was coming pressing on every thought. Meanwhile, at the hub, Kara moved with quiet deliberation. Her hand rested lightly on her abdomen, feeling the soft insistence of the child within. Pregnancy had progressed steadily, and while her movements were careful, they were purposeful. She had coordinated remotely with Arg, ensuring that containment protocols for the seed and fragments were ready. By the time the Dust Widow docked, she was in the containment chamber, overseeing the secure enclosures designed for the seed and its 3 fragments. The main seed, roughly the size of a balled fist, pulsed faintly in its container. The 3 smaller fragments orbited nearby in their own enclosures, each humming a subtle rhythm that complemented the seed's energy. Arg stepped into the deck, boots clanging softly against the metal floor. He immediately saw the seed and fragments. Even small, their presence was commanding. Kara met his gaze with expression taut with focus. "We need to move quickly," she said. "The fragments are pulsing more strongly. The main seed is aware." Arg nodded and moved to the container.
"I've arranged with the commander. The orphans are stable under his oversight. We'll focus here."
Kara gave a small nod. "Then we do this together. There's no time to waste." They began the delicate task of transferring the seed and fragments into specialized transport harnesses. The main seed required careful handling despite its small size. The fragments, though smaller still, demanded precise alignment to maintain energy resonance. Arg lifted the seed container carefully, feeling its subtle weight in his hand. Heavier than appeared, dense with potential. Kara handled the fragments one by one, arranging them in geometric alignment around the main seed. Each placement mattered. Even a slight misalignment could destabilize the energy flow. As they worked, the pulse in Arg's chest grew stronger, echoing faintly through the containers. He stole a glance at Kara. Her hand rested on her abdomen again, grounding him, a reminder that their child, human and vulnerable, was intertwined with this moment of cosmic consequences. They moved in practiced synchronicity, communicating in short phrases and gestures. Every motion was deliberate, every adjustment precise. No one spoke more than necessary, each fully aware of the weight of what they carried, both figuratively and literally. Once secured, Arg moved to the control panel, reviewing transport calibrations, containment field alignments, and energy dampeners. Kara monitored readings beside him, occasionally making minor adjustments. The fragments pulsed in quiet harmony with the main seed, their energy subtle yet insistent.
"You ready?"
Arg asked quietly. Kara exhaled, eyes steady. "As ready as we'll ever be." The docking bay doors opened. Light spilled across the deck as the Dust Widow lifted the containers carefully, engines humming. The expanse of space awaited, dark and infinite. No moment was wasted. Every calculation, every precaution had been made. The flight out of the hub's immediate vicinity was smooth but tense. Ark could feel the fragment's energy humming through the ship, synchronized with the main seed, growing stronger with every kilometer. The pulse was insistent, a quiet demand that reminded them of the impending trial. Kara rested a hand on her belly again, feeling the child shift, as if acknowledging the tension in the room. "We can do this," she whispered. Arg nodded, gripping the controls.
"We will. Every precaution is in place. The trial will begin soon, and we will face it together."
The seed and fragments vibrated subtly, a reminder of the challenge ahead. Every decision, every moment mattered. Mistakes were not an option. By the time they cleared the hub, all containers had been double-checked, systems verified, and precautions secured. The Dust Widow now carried the seed and fragments like a sacred cargo, the subtle pulse of energy echoing through the hull. Arg glanced at Kara. Her eyes were calm but resolute. In the quiet between the fragments' hum and the ship's engines, They shared a silent acknowledgement. The trial would demand everything of them: strength, focus, precision, and courage would all be tested. They were ready, and there was no turning back. Epilogue. The Dust Widow glided through the void, engines humming steadily as it carried its precious cargo, the seed and its 3 fragments, alongside 2 of the most determined pilots. Arg sat at the helm, hands gripping the controls, eyes scanning the instruments and the infinite stretch of black beyond. Beside him, Kara rested against the console, one hand lightly cradling her abdomen, the other brushing the edge of the containment field holding the seed and fragments. The subtle hum of energy pulsed beneath the ship's hull. The fragments vibrated faintly, barely perceptible, but insistent, guiding them onward like a quiet compass. Arg felt it in his chest, a rhythmic pressure that synchronized with the hum of the engines. Only he and Kara could perceive it. The children at the derelict station would not, and the guild at the hub had yet to feel the subtle influence. Kara's gaze shifted from the seed to her belly, and she exhaled softly. "I feel it too," she said quietly. "The fragments. They're pointing us somewhere. I don't know where, but they're insistent." Ark's hands tightened on the console. "They're leading us to the next trial. I can feel it in the way the energy pulses, in the subtle shifts around the containers." He glanced at her, concern evident. "But I can't stop thinking about you and the child. What if the trial... What if it affects you?" Kara's lips pressed together, and she drew a deep breath. "I've thought about that every day since we learned the fragments were waking. Every possibility, every risk. I'm afraid, not just for me, but for the child. What if it changes something?" Arg reached out, brushing his fingers along her hand. "We'll handle it. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. I'll keep you safe, and the child, I swear it." She allowed a small nod, though tension remained in her shoulders. "I know you will. I trust you. But still..." Her voice trailed off, unspoken fears lingering in the charged air. The hum of the seed fragments intensified subtly, as if echoing their uncertainty, guiding them forward with quiet urgency. Arg felt it too, a tightening pressure threading through his bones. The trial was near, and there was no turning back. Far away, at the derelict station, the orphans moved through the routines Arg had drilled into them. Teo monitoring energy systems, Kerr conducting hull integrity checks, Ariel adjusted environmental controls, and Jarek oversaw supplies. Even the youngest children executed tasks with surprising precision. Chaos had been replaced with order. Every system hummed steadily, every patch and repair reinforced. The children were competent. Arg's careful training had ensured that. They were alone in distance, but not unsupported. The hub commander monitored from afar, ready to intervene if necessary, though it was clear the children could manage on their own. And even in the void's emptiness, the seed fragment's subtle influence seemed to nudge them toward readiness, a silent guidance none of them could perceive directly. Back aboard the Dust Widow, Arg and Kara completed final adjustments to the containers. The main seed, dense and compact, roughly the size of a balled fist, rested safely, pulsing faintly, a quiet heartbeat of potential energy. The 3 smaller fragments hovered nearby, each emitting a soft rhythm, harmonizing with the main seed. Every precaution had been taken, containment fields stabilized, harnesses secured, systems double-checked. The energy of the seed pulsed insistently, subtle but undeniable, threading through the ship and brushing against their awareness. Kara placed a hand on the main seed's enclosure, whispering, "It's alive, more than we imagined. I can feel it, even through the containment." Arg glanced at her. "It's guiding us. Every movement, every pulse. It's showing us the way. But how we walk it, that's our responsibility." The fragments pulsed more sharply, responding to the certainty in his voice, the main seed echoing the subtle crescendo. The trial would not wait. Preparation had limits. Action was inevitable. Kara placed her other hand on her abdomen, feeling the gentle stirring of a child, a counterpoint to the escalating pulse. Whatever happens, she whispered, we protect this life. Nothing else matters as much. Arg nodded, closing his eyes briefly. Together, he said. The Dust Widow adjusted its course, guided by the seed and fragments, traveling through the cold and indifferent void toward the next trial's unknown location. Stars glimmered like scattered jewels across the black canvas, but the path ahead was illuminated subtly, not by light, but by the quiet insistence of the seed's energy. The next location lay somewhere ahead, hidden within the vastness, waiting for them to arrive. Every micro-correction mattered. Every decision carried weight far beyond themselves. As they moved, Arg allowed himself a glance at Kara. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held the tension of anticipation. The child within her shifted again, small kicks echoing faintly in rhythm with the fragment's pulse, a reminder that life, hope, and the future were intertwined with the peril they now faced. The guild at the hub maintained operations quietly in the background, aware that Arg and Kara were engaged in urgent preparations. Members monitored communications, life support, and logistics, their vigilance a subtle support structure for what was to come. Though not directly involved in the trial, their readiness underscored the wider network of care and oversight surrounding the Dust Widow and the Seed. Even as the hours passed, Arg and Kara worked in near silence. Transport harnesses were checked and recalibrated, containment fields verified multiple times, and every precaution double-checked. Yet the pulse of the seed and the fragments continued, a persistent reminder that readiness did not guarantee safety. Each thrum was a call, a guide, a warning. Kara rested her hands over her belly again. I can't stop thinking what could happen, what the trial might do to us or the child. Arg reached for her hand, fingers brushing hers. We'll walk this path together. That's all we can do. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. I'll protect both of you. She allowed herself a breath, letting the tension in her shoulders ease just slightly. Together, she echoed. The Dust Widow moved forward, carrying the seed and fragments, their pulsing energy threading through the hull. Ahead, the unknown waited. The child stirred again, softly but insistently, as though recognizing the gravity of the moment. The orphans managed their station competently. The guild prepared at the hub, and their fragments whispered their subtle guidance, leading the ship inexorably towards the next trial. The void was infinite, dark and indifferent. The trial was inevitable. The seed and its fragments pulsed as a quiet guide, threading through the ship, through space, through the hearts of those aboard. Life, hope, and the future was balanced precariously on a single invisible thread. And in the quiet hum of the Dust Widow, amid the pulse of the seed and fragments, Arg and Kara understood it fully. Nothing would ever be the same again. The trial awaited. The future was coming, guided by unseen forces and their own courage. They were ready, and the seed waited. The end. A Void Miner. Children of the Belt.